You'd tell them this little funny story, you know, and they'd laugh. They'd walk away from the window laughing, and the branch manager would say, boy, that's Sally. She really delivers customer satisfaction. They're really feeling good about how she serves them. A customer satisfaction model is a simple thing, but it does two things in a relationship mode, dealing with the opinion leaders about that branch that we have rarely done. First of all, we bring them all together to face the situation, the people opportunity together. The customers, or at least the opinion leaders, and the actual people delivering it, they jointly design the model. And then it's very self-policing, because as soon as the model isn't delivered, you can be sure the customer start to say something about it. Furthermore, it's self-policing internally, because the people there want to live up to the model. It's an interesting technique. In this particular bank, we are now moving it into the internal departments, those who serve only other people inside the bank. After all, those are customers too. And we're finding a really, what will I say, a change in the philosophy of the organization. That's one technique. Another technique that is becoming highly, what will I say, sophisticated, because so many people are using it, is one that we call constituency relations. Now, the telephone companies invented this, and so you may very well have had one of these for years. You may call it a key contact program or an ambassador program. But today, constituency relations programs are being widely used, and here's how they work if you don't already have one. First, we make that all-important opinion leader list. All of these programs depend on knowing who are the opinion leaders. And after a break, we'll talk a little bit about how do you identify these people, how do you make these lists. After we know who those opinion leaders are, then we recruit a group of people inside the organization at all levels of the organization who want to be key contacts or ambassadors, and twice a year seems to be a good formula. Twice a year we go visit those people. We go sit down with them for an hour or so. Now, how do you get this started? Sometimes people say, well, why would they want to talk to you? Very simple. The real motivator for an opinion leader is to be recognized as an opinion leader. We put out newsletters when we want to put them out, which is usually monthly, quarterly, bi-weekly. That kind of screwy. I thought we were customer motivated. Why don't we put out the newsletters when we've really got something important to say and not just to fill the space? Well, when I say that, some people, and particularly the public relations people responsible for putting out the newsletter, always say, well, that's not true. We really have to get it out there. It's very important to come out every month. It's part of the stability of the company. To which I say, is that right? Well, let me ask you a question. Suppose you missed a month, what would happen? And oh, I get all the same arguments. And I say, okay, let's test it behaviorally. Has anyone ever called you up and said, Mary, I'm missing volume 16, number 8? Has anybody ever called anybody around here and said, you know, I can't find volume 16, number 8 of the newsletter. Did I really miss something important? Well, I think you're getting my point. Let's now look at all of this, not from the managerial point of view, the way we did before, but from the point of view of the average employee at any level. So it would include managers, but the whole family. Do we know, could we postulate, have we got any evidence that these kind of things have an effect on the employee per se? How do they come at this? The number one thing that we have found these kind of programs work on is what many, what do I call them, labor force futurists, labor force predictors are saying is the number one problem. And we've all read about how employee loyalty is declining. I have some studies that we have done over a period of almost 30 years, and I have some fear that that may be a wonderful cliche that certain consultants are out selling to tell us loyalty is declining. I'm not sure it ever was really in here as high as we like to think it was, but I think we lived in an era not long ago when to say you weren't 100% loyal was somewhat suicidal, so I wouldn't be too worried that it's changed that much. But the point is, we know we need it, whether it's changed to a new low level or not. We know we need it. So what can something like this do to an employee's loyalty? Well, Here's what we're finding. First, let's talk about the #1 threatened employee group, middle managers. We all know about downsizing and squeezing and removing layers, and it makes good sense. And if you're going to have programs like this, clearly you don't need middle managers, because we don't need anybody anymore just to look over your shoulder to tell you how to do it. You're doing it yourself on your own motivation. We all know that's better. We don't need to talk about that. Does this have any impact, however, on those mid-level managers who are in the organization? This program right here turned out to have a fallout value that admittedly we had not even thought about. It wasn't part of the motivation in setting up constituency relations programs in the first place. Here's what we're finding. That if you take a middle manager who maybe has a lot of years of experience and they're kind of tired, maybe they're kind of burned out, or maybe their loyalty has gone down because they've looked around the world and seen that they are in fact an endangered species. And all of a sudden now you're asking them to go out and be the organizational representative to a short list of important people. And they're going to carry the message, and they're going to listen, they're going to do all these things. We hadn't even thought of it, but here's what we found. We found that this was like the fountain of youth for a lot of these middle managers for this reason. All of a sudden, they say, hey, I am doing something that's really where the action is in this company. Everybody today knows that this interface between the outsiders and the organization is where the action is. And suddenly they say, hey, I'm part of this. I don't just do my job. You've now given this person a new sense of importance in the organization. But they still are stuck with some questions of their own, naturally, like all of us have. By the way, I never met a CEO also who didn't have a lot of questions about the organization, so that's pretty typical. I liken it to being a sports fan. With your other sports fans, you will tell how awful the fullback is, how dumb it was to lose last Sunday, until somebody who follows the other team shows up. And suddenly your quarterback is the world's greatest, right? And your team, there has never been anything like your team. That's real, again, human nature stuff, and that's what we find happens. So the first thing we discovered was here that this really impacts middle managers. So having noticed that, then a lot of people who do this started looking, well, what does it do for other people? And they found that it has the exact same effect, and even maybe a more powerful effect, when you involve operators and linemen and maintenance people. When you really run these programs up and down the line, obviously, you're careful who you send out, you train them, you make sure that their knowledge is proper and all that, but nonetheless, their levels in the organization are pretty broad. It's even more important to them, because suddenly now they're saying, wow, I mean, I'm a lineman, and here I am, I mean, I'm part of this action. It just turns out to have a tremendously, what's that key word today, empowering effect. That Peter Drucker is right. This is a human community, it's a family, and I am a valued member of the family. And if I'm a valued member of the family, my loyalty just went up maybe 20 or 30 points. If you don't give me that opportunity to participate, you're asking me to be a critic. The interesting thing is today that if we are strategic about it, we can craft single programs that reach both ways. They give us tremendous outreach and fantastic in-reach, and both of them based on relationships and on behavior. I like to talk about these teams particularly because for 25 years, the way to build teamwork in an organization has been to send us all off on a weekend somewhere, with a guru who's going to make us into team builders. Some of you, I can see you're nodding your head, you've been at those. Really, those are contemplate your navel sessions, in my opinion. Because the bottom line is that you will be a better person, and you are all better persons, and therefore we will be a better team. Baloney. They come back on Monday and it's the same old place. However, take those same people in the workplace, give them an assignment, and what are they now? They're practicing teamwork right at the job. And the first thing you know, we got teams, and we didn't even have to go away for a weekend. So these activities turn out then to work both ways. And that's the critical piece. And that's the point that I really want to to reinforce here, if I can, is this whole idea of Drucker's, which obviously he doesn't own. A lot of others of us have had that same idea of, are we really a human family? What is the value of the employee? And I'm not even going to talk about or give credence to the idea that there's going to be a shortage of really trained people in the next few years. We know that. I mean, the demographers have told us that. There's a utility in Delaware, in the USA, that is just an incredible example of what happens when you do put everybody on a team. This outfit made a slight miscalculation about 1960. They built a nuclear power plant. And it has been a ghost ever since. The particular town they're in is getting a rising number of Hispanic immigrants from Central and South America. And those people, if you know your Spanish at all, they call this plant El Elefantino Blanco. That is the plant. And with that kind of stuff going around the community, they got problems. Well, the chairman of the board there is a person who's really, he's really out rubbing elbows all the time with the folks in Delaware. And he decided that the only way he could deal with this was by empowering all of his people to go deal with it. And so he said, how are we going to do this? And he himself came up with the idea that he would put everybody in the company on a team. They have about 6,000 employees. He put them all on a team. They're all on some kind of team with a job. If it isn't a quality team or an issue anticipation team, it may be a clean up the yard team. I don't care. But they're all on a team. And by using those teams, first to build the participation, the empowerment, and then to build the pride, his next step, of course, was then to say, hey, I notice we have a little problem. Could maybe some of you teams, would you be willing to go out and take on this constituency job? And you know how that is. A few teams said, yeah, we would. Pretty soon the other team said, well, we don't want to get left behind. We would. Pretty soon all the teams were out there doing it. Literally within a 12-month period, this company went from being about as disliked as any I have ever seen in my career to being one of the stars in that state. And I mean, it caused really interesting problems because you've got 6,000 employees, they're on the team. Little questions come up like, doesn't that mean they should all be able to go to the annual meeting? There's only one problem. There's no place that seats more than 3,000 people. Very simple. Every employee in the place is on either Group 1, Group 2, or Group 3. And each year, Group 1 goes the first year to the annual meeting, Group 2 goes the second year, Group 3 goes the third year. I was at one of their annual meetings. The place is jammed to the gills. Does this ever impress the stockholders, by the way? But the place is filled up. Here's everybody. You know, a lot of guys who work on transformers in their greasy overalls, but it's Group 2's turn to go to the annual meeting, and they're sitting there right alongside, you know, Joe, investor from Wall Street, and they're all at this meeting. Well, you know, how could you beat that? Because I think employee relations, whether we like it or not, at least during a transitional period in the way we structure our organizations, is responsive to one thing more than any other, and that is how we as managers and our colleagues conduct our lives behaviorally. How are we acting as individual managers, and how are other people in the organization in this era of change acting? Well, we've got some interesting studies, and I just want to share them quickly with you. Fortune magazine, I don't know if you see that up here, it's an American publication, a U.S. publication primarily, but Fortune is one of those that we have a lot of confidence in because they usually never catch on until something is absolutely here to stay. They're not a path breaker, in other words, and if you read it there, you know, boy, this has caught on. Well, not long ago, they ran a description of what the managers of the 90s are going to be like. What kind of skills are they going to have, and what kind of organizations are they going to be in? Hopefully, all of you will be sitting there saying, yep, we knew this right along. This is the way we're pushing with our programs, but let me read you the list anyway. First of all, organizations will be adaptive learning organizations. Hierarchical organizations are out. I hope that's what's happening. I hope that's truly the philosophy here. How then will these organizations be led? First of all, they will have people who, one,